And I know that we have had a lot of information flooding in the last number of classes, both from lectures from others and explanations of the Sat Yoga view of what's going on in the world. And I think it wasn't long after we mentioned that we were at the OK Corral that the shooting actually did start with an attack on the nuclear bombers in Russia, and followed by many others. So the guns are going off. The shooting phase has begun in earnest. And so we have to shoot for God consciousness with equal alacrity and ingenuity and innovativeness in terms of our willingness to adopt a radically uncommon sense of what reality is. Because common sense won't cut it any longer, because the world has gone mad. It doesn't make sense. And if you try to use two-valued logic to figure out what is going on, you missed most of the more subtle forces that are at play. And you especially miss the forces that are at play within your own consciousness. And so it's extremely important to be able to be in what we quaintly call a world without confusing it to be something that stands outside of our consciousness, but to recognize that there is nothing outside of consciousness. Consciousness is all. You are consciousness. Everyone is a manifestation of consciousness. And consciousness has no boundaries. And the more that one explores into the depths of consciousness and doesn't stay on the surface of the chattering ego program, but enters into that depth, the more one is aware of the richness of consciousness, the intelligence that is dreaming this extraordinary theodrama, and be able to be in it as a manifestation of the dreamer, of the single intelligence that underlies and serves as the self of every being. Every being who says I in their mind about anything, I am this, I want that, I am going to do this, whatever it might be, the I, ultimately and immediately, is the self that is God. Everything is the one consciousness manifesting its own playful creativity, even by deciding not to know itself, even by choosing to manifest as a character who is ignorant of its own nature. This is the play of God that enables the discovery of the divine nature by that tiny sliver of consciousness that has chosen to veil itself from itself. We are not veiled by an other. We're not veiled by karma. We are not blinded by some traumatic event that has victimized us and made us focus on concerns that are related to the past that we keep repeating over and over, or any of the patterns of the ego mind that we know so well. But all of this is a self-chosen form of hide and seek, of self-concealment and self-revelation. And at the moment that the I chooses to reveal itself to itself, we tend to call liberation, jivan mukti, freedom, redemption, salvation, but it is all simply the play of consciousness enjoying every possibility of experience, every possibility of loss and abandonment and bereftness and shipwreckedness in a strange, cruel, alien world, and at the same time to know deep in the heart that this is a game that is being played by a consciousness that is eternally untouchable by its own dream field, and gives itself at the perfect moment its own revelation that brings the return of bliss to that tiny fractal of consciousness that had put itself out of the loop in order to be able to have the joy of that experience of self-realization. But to go through it in a way that would provide the raw material that would be transformed alchemically by that revelation into wisdom, compassion, divine love, wisdom that creates the power to dream a new world, to turn the hell realm that one's life and the life of the planetary manifestation has turned to into, again, a kingdom of heaven. That power that almost no one believes in anymore has to have been completely abandoned by humanity itself in order for this revelation to have the maximum impact when it returns in that final moment of the ultimate fireworks of both spirit and matter as a single whole. And it's in the lead up to this grand finale that we now have the joy of front row seats in the ultimate spectacle of the eschaton that becomes the new creation. And to have the privilege and honor of co-creating that new heavenly abode for the benefit of every soul. And that enables us to graduate from this video game wisdom school of the spirit to that eternal light and bliss of the eternally transcendent consciousness. And so our function at this end of days is to abide constantly in that state that is your natural state. It's not something alien. It is intrinsic and inherent to your consciousness to know the joy of pure presence without a narrative, without a sad story or an anxious story or a confused story or an angry story, whatever it might be, to be free of that baggage. In that natural state of our being, in that freedom, the grace of the full power of God's mind, intelligence, and joy, love, capacity for healing, and for detachment from any trace of suffering or limitation, from any stain of emotional reactivity. That state in which we are always already the pure self is here and now, accessible. And if you have not yet arrived at that moment when it is realized in its fullness, then know that that is your destiny. It is ahead. And it will arrive at the perfect moment. And the only way to accelerate the arrival at that moment is to not desire it at all. Because to desire something creates a sense of lack. And it's the illusion of lack itself that is what must be overcome. The illusion of separation, the illusion of difference, of fallenness, of sinfulness, of being a mere finite human creature in a dying world. All of those illusory stories that have kept the ego mind and the soul asleep under the influence of the ego mind in a prison of unhappiness. All of that will break apart. And when it breaks apart, like any pot or vase, the space within it, once that pot breaks, is not separable from infinite space. There are no differences in consciousness when the true nature of consciousness is realized. And that true nature of consciousness, although it is inconceivable to the ego that only can think with concepts and language and two-valued thought of it's this or that, it has to be an object with certain properties or qualities, etc. None of that is true. That's why there must be uncommon sense, because you will never find the self by looking or by analysis or by an attempt to grasp it through some metaphysical formula. Even though the process of trying to reason it out is a necessary part of the ordeal that constitutes the rite of passage into that moment in which there is freedom from even the desire for liberation from desire. And underneath the constant activity of the rajasic mind and its tamasic diversions of spacing out and of trying to divert itself from its own truth, its own self-knowledge, its own presence, because of unbearable aspects to its personal story, especially those aspects of the story repressed into a subconscious dungeon in which we have trapped a good part of our soul and our heart. All of that must be retrieved, and can only be done so when we have felt the security and safety and love of the presence of God that is forever omnipresent. If we would only be able to resonate with that vibrational frequency of presence that has no desire and no fear. And in that state, the total power of presence fills the emptiness when the mind has become still and free of every trace of the ego's narrative. And in that empty space of presence, attending upon the ultimate and the intimate self, the moment of grace will be given in which all things are new and realized as perfect, beautiful, divine, and there will be complete fulfillment of the heart. This is the unfoldment of consciousness in its true alchemical nature that is predestined for us to unfold in our own unique individual way, in our own unique individual vision quest that we have made of life, and to turn all of the dead ends of our seeking in the wrong places into the wisdom of knowing how to abide and perceive only the purity of the infinite God Self everywhere, in every moment, in every one, and in the entirety of the cycle of time as a mandala, completely present from beginning to end, and present in the heart as the absolute flowering of one's own divine nature as a being who, having adored the ultimate God who is unknowable, becomes that unknowable and yet totally present consciousness that shines with the glory of God without any egoic credit or blame or sense of separation from the whole. And all of this will unfold when there are no further questions of how do I do it? What should I do? When there are no further questions and the ego mind has been silenced, then the inherent wisdom of the soul flowers into that perfection of manifestation of the supreme reality. May you all accept the blessing of your divine nature and have faith in its reality.